In 1985, the ACTU took the question of occupational superannuation to the then Conciliation and Arbitration Commission, arguing superannuation was an industrial issue within the ambit of the Commission. The application was supported by the Hawke government. This was quickly followed by a related Nationals wage claim of 4%, which eventuated in a wage super trade-off negotiated by Hawke and the unions, which saw the 3% of wages diverted into superannuation. That deal was thereafter referred to as a productivity agreement. At the time, the Coalition saw it differently, and its response came from its leader, John Howard. In the House of Representatives in November 1985, speaking about the agreement, Howard said, "The issue of superannuation is day by day assuming more importance in the economic and political debate of Australia, and well may it, because the current campaign for the superannuation benefits, which flows out of the agreement, owes more to a Chicago-style extortion racket than it does to a proper and logical extension of superannuation." Now, for context, Howard held the view that the deal was a means by which the Labor Party could save the reputation of the much vaunted accord and put the extra costs onto the employers who picked up the tab. Howard, of course, was right to make those comments, as the whole episode was a prime example of the excesses and shortcomings of labour relations and incomes policy which operated in Australia at that time. It was what Henderson termed in his seminal 1983 Quadrant magazine article, the Industrial Relations Club, and the club was in full swing. Henderson observed an informal cabal of thought and convenience between the ACTU, the Australian Conciliation and Arbitration Commission, the Industrial Registry, the Federal Department and some peak business bodies. Here a higher priority was given to consensus and industrial harmony at the expense of productivity considerations and the interests of individual workers. However, it would be regrettable if the well-founded criticism made by the Coalition at that time were to endure or re-emerge on some level and taint a broader appreciation of superannuation policy and its success. Award and occupational-based superannuation only took the Labor Party's aim of universal coverage so far, and it was as Prime Minister Keating opted for the route of compulsion by legislation. Australian superannuation is a great policy achievement, and here's why. It puts Australia within striking distance of achieving what no other democracy has yet done, to fully fund on a sustainable basis the retirement needs of its population.
My dream, my great hope, the traditional value of the Liberal Party is freedom, is the idea that we want to see individuals emerge from some vast faceless class of anonymous integers and shine in the world as the brilliant, distinctive, unique creatures that each one of us is. We want individuals to experience the dignity that comes from having maximum levels of control over their own lives, their own thoughts, their own decisions. And I don't want to patronise you, but I had this quite arresting experience very recently with a sort of 15-month-old child, a little girl I was sitting with a sort of a square box with a square, a circle and a star cut out and 3 blocks to fit in the box. And we sat there and she was mesmerised as I was putting the circle into the circle and the star into the star and then taking the lid off and dumping them out and starting all over again. Now, I reckon she would have done this for 24 hours, just watching. Then eventually I handed her the star and turned the box, and she picked it up in her chubby little hands and she was trying to get it into the star and it just wouldn't go. And she tried and she tried. So then I took it and put it in myself. And then I took it out again and I gave it to her and she finally managed to manoeuvre it into the star and she looked up and burst into applause. It's this magnificent achievement of her life. And that is the moment that liberal philosophy is aimed at. My argument would be that Labor is happy to spend the hour sitting there with the child saying, this is the hole it goes into. And the child's sitting there going, oh yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, that must be the hole it goes into. Ronald Reagan talked about the journey after the Challenger disaster and gave what I would regard as one of the greatest speeches of the 20th century. just I think about 3 hours after that disaster. I think informed by an Australian, Peggy Noonan, who was his principal speechwriter, but it was Reagan who gave it, and it was a Reagan sentiment. He talked about the long march of the human race from the swamp to the stars. And we want to reach the stars.